XRP takes over Ethereum. Ripple USD flippening officially happens at $801 million supply. Welcome to XRP Financial Horizon. And if you landed here today, your timing is actually perfect. Something just happened in the Ripple ecosystem that most people in crypto completely missed. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it matters more than almost anything else that's happened in the stablecoin space this year. We're not talking about a price pump. We're not talking about a partnership announcement. We're talking about a real, confirmed, on-chain shift in power, the kind that doesn't make headlines on mainstream finance sites, but quietly reshapes the competitive landscape in ways that take months or years to fully show up. The XRP Ledger just overtook Ethereum in Ripple USD stablecoin supply. And if you're not sure why that sentence should stop you in your tracks, stick with me, because we're going to unpack every layer of it. Here's the number that started the conversation. According to on-chain data from the Ripple USD tracker, RLUSD supply on the XRP Ledger has reached $801,796,535. On Ethereum, that same supply has pulled back to $795,598,530. $6 million separating first place from second, and for the first time in RLUSD's history, XRP Ledger is on top. The total combined supply across both chains is now knocking on the door of $1.6 billion. Now, before you move on thinking this is just a numbers game, here's what I want you to hold on to. This gap didn't appear because someone suddenly flooded the XRP Ledger with new capital. The story behind why this happened is actually far more telling than the headline itself, and that's where this gets genuinely interesting. What actually drove the crossover was not aggressive XRPL expansion. Community analysts tracking the on-chain data noted something specific. Large-scale client redemptions were taking place on the Ethereum side. Batches of RLUSD were being burned on Ethereum, supply was contracting, and institutions or large holders were cashing out of that side of the equation. Meanwhile, the XRP Ledger held steady. No dramatic activity, no headline-grabbing inflows, just consistent, stable demand that didn't waver. So what you're really seeing here is not a story about XRPL winning, it's a story about XRPL not blinking while Ethereum gave ground. And in financial markets, that distinction matters enormously. Consistency under pressure is one of the clearest signals of where institutional confidence actually lives. Keep that in mind as we go deeper into this. Now let's put RLUSD's overall position in context, because this is where the story gets even more compelling. CoinMarketCap data shows RLUSD has now climbed to 8th place among all global stablecoins, carrying a market cap of approximately $1.598 billion, and generating over $166 million in daily trading volume. Stop and think about that for a second. The stablecoin market is not a space you break into easily. It's dominated by assets with years of liquidity, institutional trust, and deep integration across exchanges and DeFi protocols. For RLUSD to be sitting in the top 10 already, with that kind of daily volume, is a sign that this asset has earned its place rather than just been assigned it. And here's the thing, it's still early. The trajectory matters more than the current rank, and right now that trajectory is pointing in one direction. The closest competitors RLUSD is chasing in the regulated stablecoin category are PayPal USD at around $2.75 billion and Global Dollar sitting near $2.9 billion. These are not easy targets. PayPal has brand recognition that reaches hundreds of millions of users globally. Global Dollar is backed by a consortium of major financial players. But RLUSD is closing the gap, and it's doing it with a compliance-first architecture that was built for institutional adoption from day one. That structural foundation is not something you can bolt on later. It's either there from the start, or it isn't. And as regulators across the US, Europe, and Asia begin tightening the rules around stablecoin issuance and operation, that foundation is going to become one of the most valuable competitive advantages in this entire sector. That gap to the top 3 could look very different 12 months from now. Here's where I need to bring in a development that might seem contradictory at first, because if you heard about it without context, you might have actually been worried. Right around the same time this XRPL supply flippening was happening, Japan's financial sector announced it was launching RLUSD operations using Ethereum as its initial infrastructure. Not XRP Ledger, Ethereum. And yes, some community members raised concerns. If XRP Ledger just proved it carries more RLUSD than Ethereum, why is one of the world's most sophisticated financial markets launching on the other chain? That's a fair question, And it deserves a straight answer, so let's give it one. The reason is straightforward and actually makes a lot of sense when you look at how major financial institutions operate. Japanese banks and financial entities have existing technical and legal relationships with Ethereum. Its infrastructure is already integrated into workflows they've been using and auditing for years. When you're operating inside a heavily regulated financial system, you don't pivot your entire back-end stack because a newer chain might theoretically be faster. You move carefully, you use what's already approved and understood, and you expand incrementally. Ethereum is the known quantity in those rooms. XRP Ledger, despite its technical advantages, represents a transition step that requires additional due diligence and regulatory sign-off. The launch in Japan on Ethereum is not a judgment about XRPL's quality, it's a reflection of how regulated finance actually works on the ground. And if you want confirmation of that directly from the people building this ecosystem, XRPL Foundation Representative Vet addressed exactly this question after the Japan launch. The point made was clear. Ethereum's early role in markets like Japan is completely logical, given its established infrastructure, and it was never the expectation that XRPL would be the first chain through the door in every single market. The goal for RLUSD has always been maximum presence across all available platforms. That means using Ethereum where it opens doors faster, and letting XRP Ledger prove itself as the preferred destination for institutional capital over time, which, based on today's supply data, is already happening without anyone needing to force it. This is the multi-chain strategy in action, and it's worth really sitting with what that means. Ripple isn't betting everything on one chain winning the stablecoin wars. They're playing a different game entirely, one where RLUSD becomes so embedded across multiple networks that its success is no longer dependent on any single blockchain's performance or adoption curve. Ethereum brings the legacy finance connections, the DeFi integrations, and the conservative market entry points. XRP Ledger brings the settlement speed, the low transaction costs, and the institutional payment corridors that Ripple has spent years constructing through its global payments network. Together, they make RLUSD more resilient, more accessible, and frankly harder to displace than any single-chain stablecoin could ever be. What today's data confirms, and this is the part I want you to really hold on to, is that the XRP Ledger isn't just a secondary deployment in that multi-chain story. It is the primary hub. Despite Japan launching on Ethereum, despite Ethereum's massive DeFi ecosystem and its developer advantages, despite all the arguments about Ethereum's entrenched position in institutional finance, when you look at where the actual RLUSD supply sits right now, XRP Ledger is holding the majority. That didn't happen because of a marketing campaign. That happened because institutions and large holders are choosing to keep their RLUSD there. And institutions don't park capital somewhere without a reason. They park it where settlement is reliable, where costs are predictable, and where the infrastructure has earned their trust. That's what the $801 million figure is really telling you. Now let's connect this to something that I think most videos on this topic skip over entirely, and it's arguably the most important piece of context you need. We are currently living through a moment where stablecoin regulation is being actively written in real time. The United States is working through stablecoin legislation. The EU's MiCA framework is rolling out. Japan, Singapore, the UAE, all of them are implementing or finalizing digital asset frameworks that will determine which stablecoins can legally operate in their markets long-term. And RLUSD was built from its inception to be compliant in exactly these kinds of regulatory environments. While some stablecoin issuers are scrambling to restructure their operations to meet new requirements, RLUSD is already there. That is not a minor advantage. It is a structural moat that will compound in value as the rules get stricter and the field of compliant options narrows. Think about what that means for XRPL specifically. If RLUSD continues to grow as a compliant, institutionally trusted stablecoin, and if the majority of that supply continues to live on the XRP Ledger, then every new market that adopts RLUSD becomes a new source of sustained activity on XRPL. More transactions, more settlement volume, more liquidity cycling through the network. This isn't just good for RLUSD holders, it builds the case for the XRP Ledger as serious financial infrastructure. Not a crypto experiment, not a speculative bet. Actual infrastructure that moves real money for real institutions in real time. And that reputation, once established at scale, tends to attract even more institutional activity. It becomes self-reinforcing. There's another angle worth watching closely. and it's the Asia-Pacific expansion story beyond Japan. Japan is one market, a significant one, no question, but the broader region represents some of the fastest-growing digital finance activity in the world. Countries across Southeast Asia, South Korea, and Australia are each at different stages of developing their own digital asset regulatory frameworks, and Ripple has been actively building relationships in many of these markets for years before RLUSD even existed. Now they have a regulated, battle-tested stablecoin product to bring into those conversations. As these markets come online one by one, the question of which chain those RLUSD flows eventually settle on will be answered not by a corporate decision, but by where liquidity finds the most reliable home. If today's data means anything, XRPL has a strong argument to make in every one of those conversations. So let's bring it back to the headline one more time, because now you have everything you need to really understand it. The XRP Ledger overtook Ethereum in RLUSD supply, $801 million to $795 million. It happened because Ethereum saw redemptions while XRPL held steady. It happened inside a stablecoin that just hit number 8 globally with $1.6 billion in market cap. It happened while Japan chose Ethereum for its initial launch, which is not a contradiction but a feature of a multi-chain strategy that's working exactly as designed. And it happened while RLUSD is positioned to be one of a very small number of fully compliant stablecoins left standing as global regulation tightens. Every one of those data points points in the same direction. This is XRP Financial Horizon. We follow the data, not the hype. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, you know what to do. See you in the next one.